Amidst the endless, gore-slicked chronicles of the lands between, a place where the very sunlight feels like a funeral shroud for lost grace, one colossus remains, standing as a testament to an honor we have long since abandoned. I don't view Godfrey simply as a participant in this story. To me, he feels like a cataclysm given form, a glorious glitch in a reality programmed for decay and hopelessness. He is the archetype of the hero, the solitary figure who looked into the maw of this universe's relentless suffering and refused to be consumed. So today, I have a lot of thoughts about Godfrey in my mind, which I must admit are not really organized and very much a jumbled up thoughts that I have jotted down. But I have to credit Smogtown and Hawksaw for most of my thoughts originated after their ideas, combined with a lot of interesting Reddit posts. Also, due to the way I'm compiling these ideas, I'm planning this video to be more of a narrative exploration, focused on storytelling and reflection rather than a guide, which I suppose is true for most of my videos. What I'm trying to say is that you probably shouldn't take this video as any kind of definitive guide on the topic. It's more of a placeholder for ideas I want to explore. Anyway, let's get started.
Be assured, the Elden Ring resteth close at hand. Alas, I am returned. To be granted audience once more.
The legend of the first Elden Lord is defined by a dual identity that bridges the gap between a primordial age of chaos and the civilized era of the Erdtree. Long before he was known as the stately King Godfrey, he was HorahLou, a chieftain of the Badlands and a warrior whose existence was defined by a philosophy where might makes right. The culture of the Badlands was one of austerity and raw strength, eschewing the golden adornments of later ages. When the time came for HorahLou to transition from a barbarian warlord to the consort of Queen Marika, he took the beast regent Serosh upon his back. This act was not merely symbolic. Serosh served as a literal weight to suppress the warrior's unceasing bloodlust, allowing the savage HorahLou to adopt the lordly persona of Godfrey and usher in an era of godly peace. Godfrey stands as a transitional figure between the age of the Crucible and the age of the Erdtree. The Crucible was an era of vital, chaotic life where the boundaries between species were blurred, a time of survival of the fittest, that later civilization would come to disdain as impure. Godfrey was a man of this era, a warrior tempered in the fires of constant competition. His military campaigns were responsible for uniting the lands between under the boughs of the Erdtree, defeating various clans and ancient powers. In doing so, he integrated the remnants of the old world into the new. This is perhaps best exemplified by Serosh himself, who was once a lord of beasts in his own right before becoming Godfrey's advisor, bringing bestial intelligence and wisdom to the early golden lineage. This integration of older cultures is physically evident in locations like Stormvale Castle. The history of the castle suggests it was once a bastion for a different power, likely ruled by the Stormhawk King or associated with the ancient dragon civilization of Farum Azula. Following Godfrey's victory, these once sovereign entities were brought to heel. The majestic hawks were wounded and grafted with blades to serve as guards, and the banished knights, who once served the Stormlord, were pressed into the service of the Golden Order. This layering of history within Stormvale's architecture reflects Godfrey's role as a conqueror who built his legacy upon the foundations of those he defeated, utilizing their strength to fortify his own kingdom. Ultimately, Godfrey is the pinnacle of what it means to be tarnished. After his final worthy foe was defeated and his purpose as a conqueror was fulfilled, his grace was divested, and he was driven from the lands between along with his kin. This banishment was intended to temper the tarnished in death and hardship beyond the borders of the fog, preparing them for a future return during the Lamb's darkest hour. By understanding Godfrey's origins as HorahLou and his deep ties to the bestial civilizations that preceded the Erdtree, one gains a clearer perspective on the player's own journey. The Tarnished are not just outcasts, but the descendants of a legendary warrior culture that once defined the very strength of the world. I believe that to understand the Elden Lord, we must first reconcile with the fact that his kingship was merely a temporary costume. As the champion set suggests, he was born HorahLou, the savage chieftain of the Badlands warriors, and when his grace faded, he simply returned to that primal truth. It is my opinion that his rise from a simple warrior to a King Consort is the most compelling arc in the game's lore. How did he achieve such prominence? One only has to look at the brutal meritocracy of his homeland. I see the Badlands not just as a location, but as a crucible where status was forged in blood and strength alone determined one's worth. It fascinates me that even their food, like exalted flesh, was a privilege reserved solely for those who had proven themselves as heroes. To my eyes, those massive iron great axes were more than weapons. They were physical proofs of a strength that would crush an ordinary person. I find it deeply moving that his warriors didn't just follow him, they sought to become him, shunning all vanity that didn't serve the kill. I've noticed a connection in the axe talisman, which reveals that Godfrey's loyalists didn't just follow him, they mirrored him, wielding axes of their own to strike decisive blows. I think that the Highland axe found in Stormvale is the very weapon depicted there, given the identical star-shaped handles and spiral engravings. To me, the bravery described in the Highland Axe's lore is the defining trait of this lineage, characterized by the confident tradition of shouting one's name before the slaughter begins. Whether it is Godfrey, HorahLou, or HorahLou, this vocal pride screams of a shared, undeniable ancestry. The DLC has only strengthened my belief that the Highlanders and the Badlands folk are one and the same. The Highland warrior set, originally the cut, the Braves set, shares the exact leather crown design seen on the axe talisman. I find the visual parallels between this armor and Godfrey's own attire, the white headbands, the fur linings, the red and blue highlights, to be a clear sign of his cultural roots. But more importantly, it highlights their most glorious pursuit, the subjugation of the savage beast. I believe the existence of gloried attire in the realm of shadow proves that bear hunting was the pinnacle of their society. Only those who conquered the great red bears were permitted to wear the red-patterned fabrics that we still see on the champion pauldron today. This bear communion wasn't a joke to them, regardless of what some item descriptions claim. I see it as a desperate, spiritual struggle to discover a god within one's own feral nature. For a Highland warrior, the hunt was a transformative ritual meant to capture the untamed essence of the wild. Even the legendary Redmane warriors seem like pale imitations of this Highlander ideal. I am particularly moved by the story of the warrior, Red Bear, who killed a beast and decided he would rather be a bear than a man. This strive for untamed strength is the heart of bear communion, a refusal to refine or modify nature, but rather a desire to channel its raw, bloody power. In their culture, a roar wasn't just a sound, it was a measurement of one's soul. What this tells me is that the Badlands was a martial clan built on a hierarchy of slaughter. HorahLou stood at the apex of this savage pyramid, a man who had mastered the bestial art of combat. It is my firm belief that his gaze eventually turned toward the ultimate trophy, Serosh, the Lord of Beasts himself. The fortified manor in Lendel serves as the physical predecessor to the spiritual Roundtable hold, offering a glimpse into the early warrior culture that defined Godfrey's reign. Much like the Arthurian legends of King Arthur, the concept of the Round Table suggests a council of equals where status was earned through martial prowess rather than divine right. In this early era, before the opulence of the Erdtree fully took hold, Godfrey, then still heavily rooted in his identity as the chieftain HorahLou, surrounded himself with warriors whose voices were valued equally. The architecture of the manor reflects this utilitarian spirit, unlike the gilded cathedrals of the surrounding city. The manor is Spartan and functional, designed to withstand a siege and serve the practical needs of a living army. The symbolism found within the manor further highlights Godfrey's transition from a tribal warlord to the first Elden Lord. The prevalence of the lion rampant banners associated with the beast regent Serosh suggests that this iconography preceded the later integration of Erdtree symbols. The presence of banished knight armor within the hold links these legendary warriors directly to Godfrey's service, framing them as the ancestors of the Tarnished people. This environmental storytelling suggests that the manor was the original home of the Tarnished before they were divested of grace and driven from the lands between. It represents a time when the strength that warrants a crown was a lived reality for Godfrey and his kinsfolk, long before they became the wandering outcasts encountered in the game. A striking detail within the manor is the shift from a communal warrior council to a traditional monarchy. While the main hall features the level playing field of the Roundtable, adjacent chambers contain throne rooms that signify a hierarchy where one voice stands above the rest. This shift likely occurred when HorahLou vowed to become a lord and took Serosh upon his back to suppress his bloodlust. The transition is symbolically punctuated by the weapons plunged into the central table, specifically a single axe among many swords. This act may represent a defanging of the warrior culture, a moment where the Tarnished laid down their old weapons and took up the mantle of lordship and order. Ultimately, the fortified Manor stands as a monument to the moment HorahLou became Godfrey, to rule alongside Queen Marika and protect the emerging Erdtree from its many early enemies. The Barbarian king had to adopt the defined geniality and poise expected of a monarch. However, the physical evidence left behind suggests that Godfrey remained a man of two worlds, preferring the functional, battle-ready holds of his past over the grander palaces built in the later Erdtree era. By examining these ruins, we see the shared history of Godfrey and the Tarnished, a lineage of warriors who built the foundations of an empire only to be deemed outdated by the very civilization they fought to establish. I have long argued that the relationship between Godfrey and Serosh is far more than a simple master-servant dynamic. When Godfrey vowed to suppress his lust for battle by taking Serosh upon his back, the beast was already the regent, meaning they must have had a history that predates the crown. The DLC lore regarding Bear Communion only makes this timeline more obvious to me. To understand why they bonded, we have to look at the spiritual nature of what they were doing. I find the distinction between communion and invocation to be the most revealing part of this history. While Dragon Communion feels like a ruinous, hungry practice that robs a person of their humanity, I see Bear Communion and Divine Invocation as acts of profound respect and taming. To me, the Hornsent's reverence for invocation shows that they viewed the beast not as a snack, but as a source of superhuman grace. Take the case of Ornis, the divine bird warrior. He didn't just borrow power, he made the wings of the bird his own. This is the subjugation the Highlanders spoke of, bringing a wild force into submission to serve a worthy master. I see the same glowing intensity in the sculpted keepers and the divine beasts. They are not just fighters, they are messengers of a raging sky. I believe the humor in the term, Bear Communion, comes from those who don't understand that this isn't about eating a heart, but about forging a bond with the beast within. When I imagine the duel between HorahLou and Serosh, I see a clash that must have been truly sublime. A brutal dance that perhaps left the great lion blinded but finally bested. By appointing Serosh as his regent, HorahLou did more than win a fight. I believe he secured a partner who would define his legacy forever. For me, HorahLou's alliance with the Lord of Beasts triggered repercussions that spiraled far beyond just the two of them, regardless of what the warrior actually intended. It is my firm belief that the relationships between leaders invariably ripple through the political realm, aggressively shaping factions and irrevocably altering the course of history. Attempting to untangle all the intricate histories and connections of these factions would make this analysis far longer than I intended, not to mention the highly speculative nature of some of these topics. So, to keep my focus tight on Godfrey's story, I will save those rabbit holes for future discussions. However, I feel it is crucial to briefly touch on the massive impact of their union, as I believe it is the key to explaining why Marika would eventually choose HorahLou to become her consort. If you know where to look, you can find Serosh's influence etched across the lands in ways both grand and surprisingly subtle. I argue that his presence, or at least designs that are unmistakably tied to him, dominates many of the land's most significant locations. For me, the most undeniable example is the Fortified Manor, where an imposing bestial relief takes center stage on a building that clearly predates the surrounding architecture. This very design is confirmed to depict Serosh himself, as evidenced by the golden beast crest shield. I find it telling that the same relief sits in Stormvale Castle, lying beneath the Elden Throne itself, which symbolically suggests to me that Serosh's significance predates the age of the Erd Tree entirely. Even the Colosseums bear Serosh's mark, in my view, alongside additional lion iconography integrated into the very architecture of these ancient arenas. Given the proximity and thematic consistency of these depictions, I think it is hardly a stretch to assume that the lion motifs also honor Serosh, or at the very least, relate to him in some significant way. I've noticed stone lion heads adorning torch stands in the prison town of Mount Gaelmere in Farum Azula, and even in areas dedicated to dragon communion, such as the cathedral in Caelid, the church in Limgrave, or even in the realm of Shadow. Finally, there is the Hornsent, whose city is adorned with lion statues throughout. Though I concede these must be in homage to the divine beasts, the thematic relations are, to me, very apparent. I suspect the lion guardians are likely related to Serosh too, but given they are often paired with Radahn's army, whose image takes after Godfrey and Serosh, I'd wager their placement is a later affair. I think that Serosh can therefore be confidently tied to ancient Lendel, the dragons, the beastmen, the ancient Gelmer society, the hawks, the Hornsent, and, most importantly, the banished knights who are curiously associated with nearly all of these locations. In fact, I've tracked another thread that links many of these places, the recurring depiction of what appears to be a world tree, predating the Erd Tree's current design in Lendel. This tree depiction is also found in various additional places that relate to the banished knights, such as Redmane Castle or on Divine Bridges. But even after all this, I find it only natural to question how Serosh, the Lord of Beasts, could hold such far-reaching influence across the realm. I believe the answer lies in truly understanding the role of beasts in the world of Elden Ring. Have you noticed that there is an underlying pattern to how beasts are portrayed? It is not their savagery. Beasts are suggested to have been granted intelligence, and with it, I see a unique role for them in the hierarchy of the lands. As the lore states, having gained intelligence, the beasts must have felt how their wildness slipped away as civilization took hold. Took hold is particularly interesting phrasing here, in my opinion. Their intelligence does not grant them full autonomy. Instead, I see them described as agents operating within specific bounds. As the Beast Champion Helm describes, the beasts, their eyes and ears covered, represent an oath. See nothing, hear nothing, doubt nothing, and carry on along the path set in stone. To me, this path positions beasts in a role of servitude. The Beast Champion armor expands on this idea. Beasts are drawn to champions and to lords. This pattern is exemplified by figures like Blide and Malekith, both of whom are bound in service to higher powers. The statues of beastmen in Farum Azula further underscore this role for me, depicting them not as independent beings, but as servants to the larger dragon statues. It seems clear to me that beasts granted intelligence assume a distinct role as intermediaries, envoys, or heralds, agents acting on behalf of powers far greater than themselves, and this motif recurs throughout the game. Divine beasts are messengers of the heavens, and their rage mirrors the tumult of the skies, of which storms are the pinnacle. The Elden Beast was the vassal beast of the greater will and living incarnation of the concept of order. The twin bird is said to be the envoy of an outer god. These ruins are guarded by chosen beastmen who wield weapons clad in lightning, the weapon of the ancient dragons. Some are sacred, specifically designated to represent divine or otherworldly forces. The wolf is the beast of the Carrion Royal Covenant, a symbol of the moon's pride that none can forget. I believe the role of beasts is distinct from that of humanity. It's clear the beastmen possess knowledge beyond human ken. Even the envoys, whose nature remains ambiguous, align more closely with beasts than humanity in my eyes. The Oracle Envoy Ashes described them as a monstrous band of musicians who employ sacred arts, while their horns are instruments that cannot be sounded by a mere human. Indeed, the Envoy Crown adds a cryptic note. No one knows what the cloth hides, but some claim to have heard a faint whimpering from inside. Marika herself relied on the two fingers, described by Enya as envoys to the greater will, and Medr, who once received signs from the greater will from the beyond of the microcosm. Not to mention the unique role beasts carry out as shadows of Empyreans. In my view, the natural servitude of beasts explains how the art of bare communion and divine invocation could emerge in the first place. The inherent tendency toward service explains to me why these powerful creatures can be subdued and channeled rather than simply fighting to the death like truly wild beasts. The relationship between Ornis and the divine bird, for example, illustrates this perfectly. He was able to tame the beast and make its wings his own because, at its core, I believe the divine bird was fulfilling a role of servitude, granting its power not to a predator, but to a worthy master. And this is also how Ornis lost this power in later years. Perhaps he no longer deserved the divine bird's loyalty, and since the relationship is an ongoing dynamic, the bestowed power can be removed just as it was granted. Given this broad role of beasts in Elden Ring, it is no surprise to me that their influence extends across so many independent societies. So, whether or not HorahLou was looking for such a social standing, Serosh's position as the Lord of Beasts ended up launching him into power and prestige, while also underscoring his unparalleled strength in taming the mightiest of beasts. Together, I believe they embodied the pinnacle of might and mastery, holding a status that likely resonated far and wide. Today, Serosh and Godfrey are so naturally paired together that I find it hard to picture the beginning of their union and how it changed how they were seen by the land around them. Sadly, much of their shared legacy has been obscured since the rise of the Erd Tree and HorahLou's transformation into Godfrey. But if you look closely, I can see echoes of the reverence they garnered from the union today. For instance, I suspect the Hornsent may have modeled their warrior armor after HorahLou himself. The ochre fabric is draped over a chest piece made to resemble the unclothed form of a hero from older times. Bird warriors are specifically described as wearing golden armor, so this bare-chested design aligns most closely with HorahLou in my estimation. The beastmen of Farum Azula, in later years, extended their remarkable smithing expertise, described as being beyond human ken, to craft Godfrey's iconic axe. We can see this through the intricate detailing on the weapon, which directly parallels the craftsmanship of the beastman's cleaver. Interestingly, I've noted the same detailing is also present on the Stormhawk axe, wielded in the present day by HorahLou, and Nephili's unique relationship with the Stormhawk King, earning its trust where others could not, further demonstrates to me the enduring respect the Hawks hold for her lineage, as well as the bond between Hawks and Farum Azula right to the present day. Crucially, there were the Banished Knights, whose legacy is intertwined with the Hawks, Farum Azula, and beyond, as shown by not just their placement in the present, but also in the Japanese text, where the descriptions for Ingval and Oleg's spirit summons describe them as wings of the Stormlord. Then, on looking beneath their helmets, I'd venture to say it's possible these soldiers could even be Draconians. Not to mention their similarities with the Hornsent, from spirit summoning to their skillful command of the elements, storm, ice, and lightning. Whatever the history, their prominence at the Fortified Manor underscores not only their respect for Serosh, but suggests to me they may have even served him, and thus HorahLou, directly. After forming his alliance with Serosh, HorahLou embraced his newfound station and established his seat within Serosh's castle, the fortified manor that would in later years become enveloped by modern Leyndell. Here, he ruled with camaraderie and equality, treating his soldiers as brothers in arms in a manner that reminds me of King Arthur's Roundtable. This type of leadership as an equal built loyalty and respect, strengthening his reputation not just as a conqueror, but as a unifying force. He chose to act according to his principles, unaffected by his rise in influence. It was a quality I believe he would carry with him for the rest of his life. The most powerful warrior in the lands between, stationed in a strategic stronghold and commanding legions of skilled soldiers and formidable allies, HorahLou was a figure of unparalleled might and influence. With all this established, it is no surprise to me that Marika sought him as her consort during her ascent to godhood. This context also sheds light on Muriel's confusion regarding Radagon's later appointment as the second Elden Lord. While Radagon was a capable champion and a leader of the Lernian factions, I maintain that his influence and accomplishments were dwarfed by the sheer power and reach of HorahLou when he rose to lordship. In time, Marika received guidance from the Two Fingers and rose in power alongside the burgeoning primordial form of the Erd Tree, the Crucible of Life. There were many who venerated the primordial crucible, but Marika's vision went beyond the current form. However, to achieve true godhood, I am certain she required a consort, a partner whose strength and legacy could solidify her divine claim. She needed HorahLou, or rather his potential, she needed Godfrey. The emergence of the Erd Tree and the Golden Order was not a peaceful transition, but a period of absolute conquest led by Godfrey, the Lord of the Battlefield. While Queen Marika was the chosen Empyrean destined to usher in a new age, the Erd Tree was initially met with total opposition. Item descriptions reveal that the early Erd Tree era was defined by constant conflict, with order only being established through countless victories. Godfrey functioned as the architect of this unification, acting much like a mythological King Arthur to unite a fractured world under a single banner. This period, often referred to as the Erd Tree Unification Wars, saw the systematic destruction of rival clans and countries that refused to submit to Marika's new divinity. The scale of these wars is illustrated by the history of Castlemorn. The Grafted Blade Greatsword, a weapon forged from the swords of an entire fallen clan, tells the story of a lone surviving champion seeking revenge against the perpetrator of his country's destruction. A sword monument confirms that this lone hero eventually fell at the hands of Godfrey himself. This encounter highlights that Godfrey was not merely a figurehead. He was the primary force responsible for extinguishing local cultures and kingdoms to pave the way for the Golden Order. Rather than discarding the weapons of his defeated foes, Godfrey often integrated them into his own holdings, marking them with his own lion crest as a sign of absolute dominance. Beyond the suppression of minor tribes, Godfrey's legacy was cemented by the defeat of the two most powerful rivals to the Erd Tree, the Stormlord and the Fire Giants. Evidence suggests that the Stormlord was likely the Dragon Lord Placidusax, the Elden Lord of the previous age. Placidusax's body is covered in deep scars and missing multiple heads, wounds that align with the strikes of a colossal axe. By defeating the former Elden Lord, Godfrey did more than win a battle. He delegitimized the previous world order and claimed its most elite warriors, such as the Banished Knights, for his own service. This victory effectively ended the Age of Dragons and signaled the total primacy of the Erd Tree. The final and most pivotal conflict was the war against the Giants. Marika herself spurred Godfrey and his warriors to put the Giants to the sword and confine the Flame of Ruin, which posed a prophetic threat to the Erd Tree. This battle involved complex alliances, with the Trolls betraying their giant kin and the ancient Zamer warriors joining Godfrey's forces. The victory was so significant that the first church of Marika was built upon the mountaintops to commemorate it, marking the official dawn of the epoch glistening with life. Although the Flame of Ruin could not be fully extinguished, Marika cursed the last surviving giant to guard the forge forever. With the giants defeated and the Flame sealed, the Age of the Erd Tree truly began, fueled by the martial triumphs of the first Elden Lord. To me, the coronation of Godfrey is not merely a political event, but a profound spiritual alchemy, where the raw, untamed gold of the Badlands was refined into the polished jewelry of the Erd Tree. This was the moment the sun first cast its long shadow over the lands between, birthing a legacy that would echo from the highest peaks of the giants to the deepest reaches of the shunning grounds. It is a story of how a man of blood and iron was tempted by the promise of grace, only to find that the price of a crown is the slow erasure of one's original self, a poetic tragedy that still beats in the heart of every player who dares to challenge his ghost. I believe that the union between Marika and Godfrey was a masterstroke of necessity born from her initial lack of absolute power. The seduction and betrayal mentioned by Mikla suggests to me a deeply personal treachery, likely involving the Hornsent, who now curse her as a wanton strumpet. By aligning with HorahLou, Marika secured the unmatched battle prowess she required to conquer the realm. Furthermore, she gained his significant political capital through Serosh, a move that I believe provided crucial diplomatic bridges to factions that originally resisted the Erd Tree's rise. Perhaps most importantly, since she was not born into status, this partnership served to legitimize her own divine claim. I find it ironic that for HorahLou to become a lord, he had to master defanged geniality. For me, the shift in his relationship with Serosh is deeply symbolic. The beast he once conquered with wildness now served to tame him with civility. I see his vow to carry Serosh on his back as a total devotion to Marika, suppressing his ceaseless lust for battle to fit her new order. This was a religious requirement. Continuing the practice of divine invocation would have undermined the Erd Tree's blessing. Thus, he merged with the beast to temper his impulses without the need for ancient rituals. The craftsmanship of his axe, forged by the beastmen of Farum Azula, perfectly reflects this dual nature. I believe its skill, regal roar, is a masterful refinement of his barbaric roots. It strikes me as telling that no clear record of his coronation survives. I think this was a calculated erasure to bury the barbaric roots of the king and the shamanic beginnings of the queen beneath a polished veneer of divinity. I am fascinated by the nameless tower in the realm of shadow. Its architecture, which matches the specimen storehouse, suggests to me that it serves as a triumphal arch commemorating a significant, non-martial union. Given its proximity to the Scattertree Chalice, I believe this was the site of Godfrey's public union with Marika. By stoically accepting the Erd Tree's sap, Godfrey demonstrated an unwavering commitment that I find almost haunting. It's possible this amber sap, connected to the fates of the gods, meant he wasn't fully in control of his own loyalty. Once he became the first demigod, his era, the Age of Godfrey, defined the realm. I see his establishment of the Crucible Knights as a way to honor the primordial life energy that still flourished. Despite his newfound civility, he remained a warrior at heart, leading from the battlefield to unify the realm under the Erd Tree banner. The earliest era of the Erd Tree's dominance is remembered as the Age of Plenty, a period defined by literal bounty, where the tree's sap, the blessed dew, dripped from its boughs as a physical manifestation of grace. During this time, Queen Marika personally bestowed these blessings upon her subjects, and the sap itself was so revered that it became amber, considered the most precious jewel of the age. As the first Elden Lord, Godfrey stood at the apex of this era, establishing the golden lineage through his offspring. This bloodline became the foundational royalty of the Erd Tree, producing legendary figures like Godwyn the Golden. Even in the current, decayed state of the world, figures like Kenneth Haight still speak of Godfrey's lineage with a reverence that highlights how central this family was to the identity of the lands between. Godfrey's reign was characterized by his attempts to integrate his warrior culture into the burgeoning Erd Tree society. Most notably, he established great arenas across the lands where ritual combat was held to honor the Erd Tree. These arenas, which still bear his signature lion iconography, served as a crucible where martial prowess could be practiced as a form of worship. This practice reflects Godfrey's unique position as a bridge between the raw violence of the past and the religious order of the present. However, this warrior-centric form of worship eventually died out. By the time Radagon ascended to the position of Elden Lord, the arenas were shuttered, signaling a shift in the Erdtree's values from physical strength to academic and fundamentalist faith. During Godfrey's tenure, the reach of the Erdtree continued to expand, though the timeline of certain conflicts remains a subject of historical debate. Godfrey likely oversaw the Lernian Wars against the Carian royals, as he remained Elden Lord until Radagon's later marriage to Renala. Furthermore, the War of the Ancient Dragons, an assault on Leyndell by Grandsax and his kin, most likely occurred during Godfrey's reign. Given that Godfrey had previously defeated the Dragon Lord Placidusax, this war can be viewed as an act of draconic revenge against the man who had dismantled their previous world order. In every conflict, Godfrey served as the Erdtree's ultimate weapon, securing the borders of the kingdom until no significant threats remained. The end of Godfrey's lordship came abruptly once his purpose was fulfilled. According to legend, the moment his last worthy enemy fell, the light of grace faded from his eyes. Having conquered all opposition, Godfrey and his warriors were no longer necessary for a kingdom entering an era of peace. In a move that appears to be a calculated plan by Queen Marika, she divested Godfrey and his kinsfolk of their grace, branding them as the first Tarnished. They were exiled from the lands between to live, fight, and die in distant lands, with the promise that they would one day be resurrected and called back to brandish the Elden Ring once more. This exile was not merely a punishment, but a tempering process designed to create a contingency of hardened warriors who could return when the demigods of the Golden Lineage inevitably failed. I cannot help but see the fingerprints of our own world's mythologies in Godfrey's legend. From the labors of Heracles to the strength of Samson, the image of a hero wrestling a lion is timeless. I find it incredible how many distant cultures trace their ancestry back to him. The chitin sellswords, for instance, mirror his rugged, primal strength and his use of beast pelts. Even their dismounter weapon feels to me like an axe by another name. I've also noticed a strange, recurring connection to curved swords, from the horned warriors to General Radahn, who idolized Godfrey above all others. Radahn's swords, bearing lion mane designs, leave no doubt in my mind that they were meant to honor his hero. Even the blue dancer and the blind swordsman who sealed the god of rot seem to fit into this framework of bestial subjugation. It is my opinion that Godfrey encouraged a specific blending of strength and skill that defined those who followed him. Perhaps it all points to a common ancestry, a time when human lineage was closer to the giants. The Roar talisman, which depicts a giant rather than a beast, suggests to me that the primal instinct behind these battle cries is biological, a remnant of a time when bellows could trigger avalanches. While much of this is speculative, the patterns are too compelling to ignore. Godfrey's legacy reaches far deeper than a simple title. He is a true hero whose influence shaped the very soul of the lands between. With that established, we must return to his time as the Lord of the battlefield. For me, the early history of the lands between is defined by a singular, violent truth. In the beginning, everything was in opposition to the Erdtree, but through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order. Thus, I view Godfrey's service to the Erdtree as absolute. While his political influence certainly forged alliances, I argue that his primary and most defining role during this age was as the Lord of the battlefield, where he swept across the land in a golden crusade to unify the realm under the Erdtree banner. He carried this out dutifully, but I urge you to pay close attention to his humanity beneath the surface, which I believe remained intact even during such a brutal campaign. The way I see it, the first and perhaps greatest threat to the Erdtree came from the fire giants, whose flame of ruin was capable of burning the Erdtree itself. This conflict was brutal and prolonged, demanding what must have been a significant investment in the mountaintops. The Erdtree's forces carved winding paths in the cliff walls, built fortifications like the Guardian's garrison, and even established churches to support their campaign. It is fascinating to realize that Godfrey commanded a diverse army in this war. In addition to his golden warriors, I believe his forces likely included Crucible Knights, Zamor Knights, Fire Monks, Thorn Sorcerers, Perfumers, and Trolls. and perhaps even figures like Messmer or Radagon. While leading such a varied group might have been a challenge for lesser commanders, I think that Godfrey's charisma and leadership unified them into a force capable of overwhelming even the mighty fire giants. And so under his command, the Erdtree faction claimed their first decisive victory. However, the aftermath of this war reveals a striking divergence in values that I find impossible to ignore. Godfrey, who adhered to a strict code of honor, was known to accept the surrender of his enemies, and during his reign, he incorporated them into the Erdtree's fold, illustrated best by the Tarnished. Here, the uniformity of the frozen giant corpses littering the landscape suggests to me that the giants surrendered in recognition of their inevitable defeat, but they were not granted mercy. Instead, they were brutally executed en masse using thorn sorcery, a technique also seen at the thorn sorcerer camps in Liurnia. This act is starkly at odds with Godfrey's principles, who I believe would have respected their surrender, and aligns far more with Marika's ruthless pragmatism, especially toward those who posed a direct threat to her rule. And as is her signature by this point, the land was forbidden, hiding the past from the world. Following the war, the crusade turned against fellow men. Though much of the history surrounding these battles has been obscured by time, I maintain that the path of Godfrey's conquests can still be traced. Since Godfrey waged war on behalf of Queen Marika, the conquered lands were adorned not with statues of him, but with statues of Marika. Only in unique locations do we see depictions of Godfrey. The churches of Marika, in particular, commemorate the expansion of her empire, as illustrated by the first church of Marika. Here, the queen herself issued instructions to her brave warriors as well as to Godfrey, urging them to put the giants to the sword before the culmination of the war against the giants. In this way, I view these churches as marking not just the geographical expansion of the Erdtree Empire, but the chronological progression of Godfrey's crusade. In total, there are 4 churches of Marika. The first church of Marika is located in the mountaintops of the giants. The second church lies in western Altus Plateau. The third church stands at the border between Limgrave and Caelid, while the fourth church can be found in the west of the Weeping Peninsula. Together, these churches map the path of Godfrey's campaign, which swept from north to south. This path suggests to me that Godfrey's journey would have taken him through Liurnia, situated between the second and third church. Yet, there is absolutely no evidence for Godfrey's involvement in the Liurnian Wars, which took place during his reign. If he had participated, I am certain it would undoubtedly have been Godfrey, not Radagon, who earned glory and faced Rennala in battle. He couldn't have moved through the region peacefully before Liurnia was conquered, nor would he have waited while his armies fought to travel past later. Instead, these churches hint to me that the geographical landscape during Godfrey's time differed significantly from the present day. Before the DLC, I theorized that this geographical discrepancy stemmed from the destruction of Farum Azula following a meteorite impact, but the veiling of the Realm of Shadow is also important, adding another wrinkle to the picture. First, let's review the destruction of Farum Azula. The meteorite not only shattered the settlement, but also propelled its landmass into the skies of the Far East, creating the floating city we see today. Evidence for the scale of this destruction lies in the lingering zero-gravity effects, which are far more pronounced than those caused by the meteorite that strikes Limgrave in the present day. The fallout from this impact sent massive fragments westward, wreaking havoc on the lands and roads of Limgrave and Liurnia. Farum Azula itself clearly broke away from the mainland, as indicated by the shared architectural style with the Bestial Sanctum, the draconic and bestial themes of the area, and the nearby Farum Great Bridge. Additionally, the enormous, unnaturally straight waterfall connecting the mountaintops of the giants to Caelid strongly suggests to me that a massive landmass once joined these regions, supporting the idea that Farum Azula was originally situated there. This theory also explains several lingering mysteries. The isolated Divine Tower was likely not isolated in the past, but part of this larger landmass. It accounts for Caelad's strong associations with drakes who could have retreated southward after being chased from the peak by the fire giants. Furthermore, both Caelad and the mountaintops share unique features, such as Titan remains and similar fauna in the giant birds and dogs. However, the DLC reshapes this narrative entirely. According to the Suppressing Pillar, this position and the realm of shadow itself once made up the very center of the lands between. While the exact integration of this lost land into the current geography remains unclear and open to a large amount of speculation, its thematic alignment is evident to me from the Dragonlands in the east to the northern Erdtree shadow. Geography has likely changed in the years since the veiling, and I don't expect the devs to make the map in a perfect 1:1 ratio with the lands between, for us to calculate where it once stood either. Indeed, the map of the lands between is a recent creation since it depicts Caelad infected with scarlet rot. What we can be certain of, though, is that the land has changed substantially through history, and this is why it is no longer possible to fit the lands together. Notably, though, the shared features between Caelad and the mountain tops, such as Titan remains or giant fauna, or any Farum Azula fragments, are absent in the realm of shadow. This indicates to me that the destruction of Farum Azula occurred after the veiling of the realm of shadow, which happened only near the end of Godfrey's age, around the time of Messmer's crusade. Thus, it follows that the entire landmass, along with Farum Azula, remained intact during his conquests, and confirms that Liurnia was not the only route available to him as he traveled southwards. In this way, the path indicated by the 4 churches of Marika begins to change. Godfrey's conquests began with the mountain tops fighting the fire giants. Then he unified the Altus Plateau, the region closest to the Erdtree. Subsequently, he traveled to Caelad, but not through Liurnia. Instead, I believe he could have safely moved through what is now the realm of shadow, or passed through Farum Azula, before finally concluding the crusade in the Weeping Peninsula. Godfrey's prowess on the battlefield was truly unparalleled. As his axe says, "In the days of the past, a crown was warranted with strength. Throughout his entire campaign, he remained undefeated, despite having his bloodlust suppressed by Serosh the entire time." Yet I argue Godfrey's strength was more than physical. He was a ruler of principle, fighting with honor and showing mercy to those who surrendered, a fact underscored by the diverse backgrounds of the Tarnished, his kinsfolk. From Draconians to Northerners, aristocrats to Reedlanders, all were welcome under Godfrey's banner. His respect extended even to his enemies, and mirrored his history with Serosh, an adversary turned regent, underscoring the values that guided his conquests. The Tarnished are not merely random outcasts. They are the direct descendants of the legendary warriors who fought alongside Godfrey during the unification of the lands between. As confirmed by Miyazaki, the player character's ancestors were stripped of grace and hounded from the land centuries before the game begins. This exile, often referred to as the Long March, was a brutal event. The term, tarnished, itself carries a dual meaning. It refers to the literal loss of the golden luster in their eyes and their subsequent loss of social value. In the eyes of those blessed by the Erdtree, like the nobility of Lendel or the demigod Morgoth, the Tarnished are viewed with the same prejudice as the impure, Albinorics, beings considered lesser for their lack of divine connection. The exodus of the Tarnished was a massive maritime undertaking, likely departing from the southern strongholds like Castle Morn. The rusted anchor weapon lore reveals that one ship was left behind, and cut content suggests those who failed to board were enslaved and brutalized, eventually becoming the crucified figures found throughout Limgrave. Those who did escape followed Godfrey on a grueling journey to find a new home, a period of constant conflict that was fierce enough to break Godfrey's legendary axe. This march eventually ended in the Badlands, where Godfrey finally divested himself of his kingship and returned to his original identity as the simple chieftain HorahLou. During their long exile, the Tarnished dispersed across the world, establishing diverse cultures and lineages. This history explains the variety of backgrounds available to the player from the HorahLou-class warriors of the Badlands to the samurai of the Land of Reeds. Some groups became nomads, adopting the flowing water combat styles of legendary swordsmen, while others established overseas churches dedicated to the two fingers, creating classes like the Confessor and Prophet. This wide dispersion across different nations and religions provided a blank canvas for the Tarnished to grow and evolve outside the influence of the Erdtree. This long passage of time allowed the Tarnished to become embedded in foreign societies, yet they remained bound by Queen Marika's ancient prophecy. While the demigods in the lands between tore the world apart during the Shattering, the Tarnished lived and died in distant lands, growing strong in the face of death only after the demigods reached a bloody stalemate and were abandoned by the greater Wielded Grace, finally returned to the Tarnished. This divine guidance serves as the final fulfillment of Marika's plan, calling the descendants of her first Elden Lord back to the lands between, to claim the throne that her own children were unworthy to hold. Few detailed accounts of Godfrey's later battles remain, but given his fighting prowess, it is clear to me what wars he did not partake in, namely the Liurnian Wars or the War against the Dragons. Else Radagon or Godwyn respectively wouldn't have been the ones to fight against the mightiest foes. But the fragments that do remain of his conquests serve to exemplify the honor and integrity with which he conducted himself throughout his crusade. One of the more intriguing stops on the newly discovered path of Godfrey's campaign is the mysterious town of sorcery, Sellia, whose story not only explains why Godfrey was absent for the subsequent Liurnian Wars, but also explains how the Greater Will discovered the blasphemy of the Nox, and why some Nox settlements remain intact even after those conflicts. At first glance, Sellia seems unremarkable, especially when compared to the vast, awe-inspiring Caelid, but a closer look reveals numerous mysteries. Whether it's the spirit sorcerers who hail from HorahLou, the magical barriers throughout the town safeguarding what Godfrey calls the secret of Sellia, the revelation that this is not just Lusat's staff, but a Nox swordstress and monk hiding their culture's giant throne, or even that, at a somewhat distant sword monument in southern Caelid, it is said that Radon once held Sellia secure. It's clear to me there is more to Sellia than meets the eye. When you think about it, Sellia's features seem to be at odds with each other. Despite being clearly a Nox settlement from the architecture, why conceal the Nox inhabitants? Why did Radon defend an enemy of the Erdtree? And what's the Academy's involvement? Fortunately, the Sellians produced a number of unique night sorceries, which I feel beautifully illustrate their history. The Sellian sorcerers were assassins, and it is said that they often hunted their fellows, used by Sellian assassins to present themselves as unarmed sorcerers. The Sellian assassins considered every option that aided their dirty work. There can be no doubt. The Sellians targeted their own dishonorably, operating from the shadows. Their sorceries are centered around hidden attacks, masking intentions, and countering other spellcasters, such as with Eternal Darkness, which creates a space of darkness that draws in sorceries and incantations. However, when Godfrey's crusade reached their doorstep, the Sellians surely knew their techniques would be ineffective against the Lord of the battlefield. His strength and skill in battle far surpassed any magic. However, as always, Godfrey was open to negotiation. And in what I view as a desperate act of self-preservation, the Sellians defected, offering their knowledge and allegiance to the Erdtree faction. The Sellians betrayed the Nox and revealed their rebellious intentions, including the blasphemous origins of the Fingerslayer blade. And it is this alliance with the Erdtree that clears up the confusion surrounding Sellia for me. Sorcerers from the Academy, who later aligned with the Erdtree, were welcomed. Radon defended Sellia not just as a Nox town or his training ground, but as an Erdtree settlement, symbolized by the Erdtree statue overlooking the town. Perhaps Sellia's secrecy was designed to protect its inhabitants from retribution. The Sellian betrayal exposed the plans of the Nox and explains Godfrey's absence from the Liurnian Wars. Upon learning of the Fingerslayer blade, the Greater Will couldn't afford to wait for Godfrey to reach Liurnia. and instead dispatched troops stationed in the Altus Plateau. This surprise attack caught the Nox off guard, allowing Radagon to rise in prominence. Had Godfrey been present, I suspect the Nox might have been eradicated, like so many other cultures. Instead, the First Lernian War ended with the Nox retreating underground. Unable to be tracked, they were banished from the surface, and their blasphemous legacy erased from history. With the Nox subdued, the Erdtree's forces immediately turned their attention to the Carians and the Academy to prevent any retaliation. This is why Godfrey was absent from both conflicts. But if you're interested in more details, I recommend checking out our timeline video, which goes further into the subject. The next known encounter is mentioned only once in the description of the Elden Lord set, where it states that Godfrey faced the Storm Lord alone. The identity of the Storm Lord and the faction they led remains uncertain, though I'm inclined to believe they ruled at Stormvale. However, the fact that Godfrey faced them alone is significant. To me, this suggests a duel of some kind, a practice historically used by leaders to avoid unnecessary bloodshed between their forces. Yet another honorable act by the Lord. Finally, at the end of Godfrey's crusade was the siege of Castle Morn. The sword monument recounts a lone hero fought for his vengeance, only to fall at the hand of Lord Godfrey. This warrior's story is expanded upon in the description of the grafted blade greatsword, once wielded by a hero hungry for vengeance. A revenger's weapon, it is burdened with oceans of anger and regret. A lone surviving champion was so determined to continue fighting that he claimed the swords of an entire clan of warriors. Despite Godfrey offering him mercy, the warrior refused to yield, insisting they fight to the death. Ultimately, his defiance led to his country's legacy becoming now vanished. Such stories were likely common during the Golden Crusades, as the memory of many cultures was lost. Yet, this warrior's weapon tells a deeper tale. Its hilt has since been adorned with the golden icon of Godfrey and Serosh, which signifies the respect Godfrey held even for fallen enemies. The weapon is treasured, as evidenced by Castellan Edgar's desperate attempts to reclaim it from the rebellious misbegotten. Godfrey's respect for his adversaries extended beyond the battlefield, ensuring that even those who fell to his strength were granted honorable deaths and enduring legacies. It's no wonder to me that so many diverse peoples rallied behind him. Beyond his unparalleled strength, Godfrey inspired loyalty through his unwavering sense of honor and the consistency with which he carried himself. His legacy as a leader was defined not just by his conquests, but also by the respect he commanded. Yet Godfrey's legacy was not defined by conquest alone. Amid an age of endless warfare, he left another enduring mark upon the world and his family. For while he was the first Elden Lord, he was also a father, and the story of his children would come to shape the fate of the lands between in ways no one could have foreseen. Godfrey's family became known as the Golden Lineage. Despite their vastly different stories, I believe each member, in their own way, reflects Godfrey's enduring influence as well as the steadfast guidance of the now-aged counselor, Serosh, to the present day. Where the journeys of most other demigods has them defecting from their parents' values, Godfrey's children all seem to take after their father in their own ways. Though we can't know what Godfrey was like as a father, I think this is a meaningful pattern, indicating that he took his role as a father seriously and in all likelihood treated his children with kindness and respect, just like he did with everyone else. Of all his offspring, Godwyn the Golden may have once stood as the epitome of a worthy heir. His personal guard mirrored the lord of the battlefield by wielding golden axes, and donned armor that proudly displayed their civilization's heritage, adorned with an antiquated depiction of the Erdtree. Indeed, their loyalty was rewarded with the largest variety of the most precious jewels of the era. Godwyn was also a formidable warrior, and he demonstrated his prowess during the assault on Leyndell by the mighty ancient dragons, where the demigod successfully defended the capital by defeating the dread ancient dragon Fortisax, the mightiest boulder stone. But more than that, he then somehow befriended his fallen foe, which in turn gave rise to the ancient dragon cult in the capital. a sect where humans were taught to harness lightning, the ultimate weapon of the ancient dragons. Does this story not feel familiar? Like father, like son, Godwyn with Fortisax in many ways mirrors Godfrey's own journey with Serosh. It also suggests to me that the techniques taught within the dragon cult may share origins with divine invocation or bear communion. Godwyn took after his father in another way as well, his charisma. His personal guard were high-ranking members in the cult who use incantations taught only to the most accomplished members. But more than that, famously, there is one other event for which Godwyn is remembered, the Night of the Black Knives, where he became the first demigod to die, slain in soul alone, while his body remained corrupted by the impure death. This impurity spread through the land, and ultimately served as the catalyst that drove Marika to the brink and brought about the shattering. And yet, despite the disgrace and humiliation of this unnatural fate, his knights remained completely loyal. Much like the Tarnished who followed Godfrey into banishment, Godwyn's personal guard refused to abandon their leader. Instead, they sought out his transfigured cadaver surrogate and renewed their purpose to protect his new form in preparation for the coming age of the Duskborn. The decayed golden wheel that adorns their helmet represents their unbroken loyalty. Godwyn clearly commanded genuine respect from his followers, just like his father. Yet, also like his father, Godwyn's story is one of tragedy, a tale of a destined heir who might have followed in his father's footsteps to great renown, but was ultimately undone by the flaws of the very order they both sought to uphold. Then there were the twin brothers, Mog and Morgott, who were both born with horns protruding from their flesh. In the present day, such individuals are known as omen and are cruelly ostracized, hidden away beneath the capital, shunned and confined in secret as a source of shame for the Golden Order. However, I remind you that horns were not always seen as a mark of shame. During the age of the Crucible, they were revered as symbols of sacred refinement. The Hornsent believed that the Crucible's evolutionary gifts were most powerfully expressed through tangled horns. Indeed, it is these very horns that actually allow the act of divine invocation. Moreover, as previously discussed, there was significant overlap, and likely an alliance, between the Hornsent and Erdtree civilizations, a period that likely saw the use of this Erdtree and Crucible sigil. This suggests to me that, in their early years, Mog and Morgott may have been viewed not as outcasts, but as fitting and highly respected sons of the royal Erdtree couple. Further evidence for this period lies in Morgott's skills in the present day, who demonstrates a strong familiarity with spiritual projection, manifesting as Margit before both Stormvale and Landau. In the latter encounter, the moment he takes form, a sigil appears beneath him, the Erdtree and Crucible sigil. Such golden techniques surely were not taught in the Shunning Grounds, and suggest to me that he once learnt them at a time when he was acknowledged as an equal above ground. Perhaps this is why the Erdtree's favorite +1 talisman can be found in a chest in Mog's chamber. It symbolizes that these brothers were once truly favored, despite their horns conflicting with the blessings of the Erdtree. Furthermore, Morgott is said to have recanted his accursed blood in later years, a term that means to renounce a once-held belief. That's to say, he may have once embraced his heritage before later rejecting it. And after the insights of the DLC, it becomes clear to me why, at one time, he might have worn his horns with pride. Finally, there is the Golden Shade of Godfrey, a spectral manifestation encountered in present-day Leyndell. It is summoned using the same sigil and in the same manner as Margit, just before the Tarnished confronts Morgott himself. In all likelihood, this, too, is Morgott's creation, a tribute to the father he revered. Clearly, Morgott held a deep connection to Godfrey, one that seems far stronger than if their only encounters had been in the Shunning Grounds beneath the capital. No, I believe Morgott and Mog once walked alongside their father, bathing in gold alongside the rest of the Erdtree's chosen. Even Godfrey's elite Crucible Knights, adorned with their own sacred horns, were once held in high esteem across the realm. For a time, so too were the Omen-born sons of the first Elden Lord. This is how Morgott came to be familiar with the Erdsteel dagger, the Giant Crusher, the Tree Spear, and the Carrion Knight sword. Notably, the Carians became allies of the Erdtree in the later stages of Godfrey's age, and suggests Morgott spent a considerable portion of his early life as a respected member of society. Morgott and Mog's connection to the Crucible is clear enough, and may suggest Godfrey has some Crucible DNA in him, but it's also worth noting how Godwyn also takes on animalistic qualities after his impure death, though these are aquatic in nature. The last known members of the Golden lineage are Godric and Godfrey, both of whom ultimately tarnished their family's legacy. Given their similar appearances, I suspect they may have also been twins. The demigods are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika. Godric the Grafted was but a distant relation. The runt of the litter, his divine blood sorely diluted. This statement, spoken on behalf of the Two Fingers, suggests that Godric is separated from Godfrey by many generations, possessing only a faint trace of royal blood. However, despite this supposed distance, he remains both a demigod and a shard-bearer of the Anchor Ring, the center of the Elden Ring. If his connection to Godfrey were purely a matter of lineage, surely there would be countless others with an equal claim to demigodhood. Indeed, while there have been unnamed demigods even in the present day, the numbers simply don't add up, especially given that demigod status in Erdtree society was granted by position, not merely by bloodline. Instead, it is far more likely, in my opinion, that Godric's own actions distanced him from his royal heritage. His obsession with grafting, a grotesque attempt to force strength upon himself, was not just a mark of desperation, but a betrayal of the very legacy he sought to embody. By grafting the flesh of others onto himself, I believe Godric physically diluted his own blood, as well as symbolically weakened his royal standing. When defeated, the body left behind is incredibly small, which further illustrates how little of his true blood and heritage he still held after all his grafting. Despite being the blood of Godfrey, he's a grotesque old fool, grasping for power. The source of Godric and Godfrey's ability to graft has only become clear after the events of the DLC. This power, ironically, stems from their mother, Marika, and her shamanic origins. In fact, this is why the shamans were so ruthlessly exploited by the Hornsent. Their flesh was said to meld harmoniously with others. Even in their shameful cowardice, both Godric and Godfrey still idolized their father, Godfrey. Godric mimics him by wielding an axe adorned with the image of a beast, a symbol of the Golden lineage. He invokes his forefathers when he successfully grafts a dragon, and then if he defeats the player, he even speaks to Godfrey himself, as if to draw a parallel between his feat and the legends of Godfrey and Serosh, or Godwyn and Fortisax, each a tale of taming a mighty beast to channel their power. Godric's misunderstanding of their feats is clear, however. Godfrey, too, despite being imprisoned for his actions against the capital, clings to his father's legacy. Within the Golden lineage Evergaol, he still holds a legendary talisman, the Godfrey icon, a final testament to his unwavering reverence for the first Elden Lord. The admiration Godfrey inspired in his children cannot be overstated. Even Radahn, who was not yet a demigod, developed a deep love for the warrior and shaped his entire career in Godfrey's image. Godfrey's unwavering respect for all, his children, his peers, and his soldiers, cemented his legendary status throughout the age. Yet, for all his strength and honor, not all would return that respect, least of all his queen Marika. The resurgence of the Tarnished in the lands between is driven by the guidance of grace, a force that serves as both a spiritual beacon and a practical source of resurrection. When the demigods of the Golden lineage failed to produce a new Elden Lord, the Greater will renounce them and extended grace to the exiled Tarnished. This power is inherently tied to purpose. As long as the world order has a role for an individual to play, they are literally unable to die. The opening cinematic illustrates this by showing legendary figures like Goldmask and the Dung Eater being beckoned back from death. Even the player, a Tarnished of no renown, is granted immortality through this guidance, existing in a cycle of resurrection until their mission is complete or they are no longer deemed useful. However, the history of the Tarnished within the lands between reveals that this call to return has been happening in waves for a long time. Early arrivals like Vargram and Wilhelm founded the Roundtable hold, an ethereal pocket dimension sustained by the Erd Tree and overseen by the Two Fingers. This spiritual hub is an exact replica of the physical fortified manor in Lendel, intended to provide the Tarnished with a sanctuary and a base of operations. Yet, by the time the player arrives, the Roundtable hold is a shadow of its former self. The Two Fingers, once full of vigor and capable of rousing orations, are now bent with age and seclusion, and the sanctuary is filled with has-beens. Rather than the venerated warriors of the past, the internal politics of the Tarnished history also included enforcers known as the Roundtable Assassins or Confessors. These loyal servants of the Two Fingers were tasked with eliminating any Tarnished who strayed from the path of grace. Items like Krippus's Vial and the Darkness Incantation speak to an era where the status quo was strictly maintained through clandestine violence. This organization has largely crumbled by the player's era, allowing various Tarnished to abandon their mission and join factions like the Volcano Manor or the Mogwin Dynasty without immediate reprisal from the Fingers. The narrative of the Tarnished reaches its climax with the return of Godfrey himself. Mirroring the legend of King Arthur as the once-and-future king, Godfrey returns to the foot of the Erd Tree in the land's most dire hour. Guided by the same light of grace that leads the player, he stands as the final crucible to test the player's worthiness. This encounter represents the ultimate legacy of the first Elden Lord. He is the progenitor of the Tarnished, the man who tempered them through exile so that one of his kin might eventually surpass him. By defeating him and earning his respect, the player proves that their strength truly befits a crown, concluding a cycle of struggle that began with the very first unification of the lands between. I believe that the moment Queen Marika stripped Godfrey and his warriors of their grace was the most calculated betrayal in the history of the lands between. I can almost hear her voice, cold and clinical, as she divests them of their divinity and drives them into the land afar to live, wage war, and ultimately die. What this tells me is that Godfrey's martial prowess had simply outlived its immediate utility to her. While her true motivations remain a mystery to many, I think that her command for them to return after death and brandish the Elden Ring reveals a long-term contingency, a plan to have them grow strong in the crucible of death itself. I find it tragic that Marika never shared these ultimate designs with her lord beforehand. It seems more than likely to me that she only formulated this desperate gambit at the very last second. I see a significant clue in the Tower of Return, standing in the Weeping Peninsula. The fact that it links back to Lendel from the exact spot where Godfrey's campaign ended, and the Tarnished departed suggests a bridge left intentionally ajar. Despite this upheaval, I am deeply moved by how Godfrey accepted his exile with such calm and graciousness, never uttering a word of complaint against his queen. It is painfully clear to me that Godfrey and his Golden Army were deliberately singled out for this fate. His children, after all, were allowed to retain their grace, which proves to me that this wasn't some natural occurrence, but a surgical, necessary move for the next phase of Marika's empire. I believe we can speculate with total confidence that the very qualities making Godfrey an irreplaceable leader had suddenly transformed him into an obstacle. He was ruthless in battle, yes, but I believe he was never dishonorable. With Serosh as his guide, I think he would have flatly refused to turn against his own allies, even if his queen demanded it. In my view, Marika's ambition for total dominion required the betrayal of former allies like the dragons and the Hornsent, acts of treachery Godfrey likely would have opposed. To carry out her darker plans, I believe her lord and his beast regent simply had to be removed from the board. Yet I see her leaving the door open, in exile as a sign that she kept him within reach should her empire ever need his sheer strength again. I've noticed how she shrouded the truth over time. While his remembrance says he left gracefully with his kinsfolk, I find it telling that later accounts describe the event as him being hounded from the lands between. I am haunted by the idea of the full Tarnished, being scorned in the present day. I believe that some followers were cruelly left behind, a theory supported by the rusted anchor and cut content describing spurned Tarnished, forced into slavery. When I see the shrieking, strung-up figures in Limgrave wearing guilty hoods, I see the remnants of Godfrey's legacy left to rot. Just like that, the hero was banished forever, without even a chance to say goodbye to his own children. In my opinion, the void he left behind destroyed his lineage. I see Godric as a pathetic failure who tried to compensate for his lack of confidence with gaudy gold and grafting. A pale, sickening imitation of Godfrey's genuine respect. I see Morgott clinging to a memory and Godwyn desperately trying to rebuild bridges with dragons. Meanwhile, Mog and Godfrey grew bitter, resenting the new path of an order that had clearly lost its soul. I believe each child bore the crushing weight of a father who was no longer there to guide them. It is my strongly held belief that the world unraveled specifically because Godfrey was gone. Marika's order became a paranoid, intolerant regime that shackled the Omen twins beneath the capital immediately after the Lord's departure. I find it telling that these shackles bear the Erdtree and Crucible sigils, showing the persecution began before the doctrine even solidified. I see the Crucible Knights falling out of favor and anyone tied to the old ways being systematically erased. I think this was the moment the banished knights were forced into a mercenary life, their influence having become too great for Marika's new vision. I find the Legion left to rot behind the shadow keep to be the grimmest evidence of this purge. To me, Marika's dominion was bought with a genocide, as she ordered Mesmer to exterminate the Hornsent in a war that I believe could not have happened while Godfrey was still in power. I see Mikla's words about betrayal as a direct reference to Marika turning on her oldest allies once she had seduced Godfrey into legitimizing her reign. I find it a cruel irony that soldiers trained by Godfrey were likely used in a war he never would have condoned. Even though Mesmer's methods eventually dominated the Shadow Keep, I've noticed that a significant number of axe-wielding soldiers survived into the present day, a testament to how well Godfrey trained them. In my view, the veiling of the Land of Shadow was Marika's final attempt to bury her blood-stained history and her shamanic origins. I see the casting aside of the ancient dragons as yet another broken alliance that happened only because Godfrey wasn't there to save them. I believe that without Godfrey, Godwyn had to step up to fight Fortisax, a burden that I think eventually led to the Night of the Black Knives and the total stagnation of the world. I see the shattering of the Elden Ring as Marika's final admission of failure, a move made because she felt powerless against her own alter ego, Radagon. I think she realized her error far too late and summoned the Tarnished back because she finally understood she needed her First Lord once more. I find it fascinating that the Tarnished were summoned long before the player arrives, creating a hierarchy in a now empty Roundtable hold. To me, we are Godfrey's true legacy, soldiers who remained loyal to a man they trusted from across the world. It is a tragedy that Marika's final grace is actually a competition, forcing us to fight the very man who should have been our commander. I find Godfrey's long march to be a heroic endeavor of absolute obedience as he waged war so fiercely that he actually broke his bespoke axe. I am horrified by the image of him and Serosh being impaled on a tree, a death that I believe was precisely what Marika wanted. In my view, by having them die, she ensured they couldn't learn of her treachery or be recruited by anyone else. They were bound to return only through her power. Miyazaki's own words confirm that this guidance of grace is a cycle the player cannot easily escape. I believe the revival of Godfrey and Serosh as one entity underscores the deep bond forged at his coronation. When he returns to find the Erdtree burning in the capital in ash, I can only imagine the sorrow he feels seeing the ruins of the world he helped build. I suspect he finds Godric's corpse and wanders the ash-covered streets of Lendel thinking of his Omen children. I think the ajar manhole cover in the Ashen capital is his doing, a desperate attempt to find his sons in the sewers despite Marika's orders. I find it heartbreaking that he is too late, Mog has escaped, and Morgott has already died after defending the throne for a father who never came. To see Godfrey holding the small, hornless body of his son is, in my opinion, the most prepared for a yet devastating moment in the game. While Godfrey maintains his composure, I can see the depth of his pain reflected in Serosh. I find the timing of Morgott's body fading into grace just as Godfrey arrives to be a cold, calculated cruelty by the Erdtree. I am disgusted by the way the Erdtree uses Morgott's grace as a tool to point Godfrey toward the player, using a son as a mere means to an end. Even so, I am struck by Godfrey's continued respect for us as a fellow warrior. He announces his intentions with the honor of a true chieftain, setting the stage for a duel that I believe is the peak of the From Software experience. I've noticed how his fighting style slowly unravels as the battle wears on, revealing the bestial fury beneath the lordly facade. Now, apart from my own takes, there is also another theory I found interesting, posted by a user who has since deleted their account. It is a bit of an older one, but very compelling nonetheless. It essentially argues that Godfrey's current placement between Malekith and Radagon feels shoehorned, lacking the proper build-up for a character of such legendary status. To remedy this, the theory proposes a radical restructure of the narrative where Godfrey is not just a late-game obstacle, but a central, guiding figure throughout the entire journey. By repositioning him and altering a few key character dynamics, the poster suggests the story would become a much more personal and emotionally resonant tragedy. The core of this idea hinges on the identity of HorahLou acting as our primary mentor within the Roundtable hold from the very beginning. The original poster points out that early development interviews and cut files suggest Godfrey was once intended to be the one ordering the player around, perhaps even occupying the physical space where the two fingers currently sit. In this version, HorahLou has forgotten his past life as the first Elden Lord due to the Erdtree's influence on memory, a phenomenon similar to how Melina struggles to recall her own purpose. This would mean that as we progress through the lands between, we are being trained and guided by the very man we are destined to eventually replace, creating a profound, long-term bond between the player and the legend they are chasing. This shift would ripple through the rest of the game's cast, specifically transforming the nature of our rivalry with Morgott. The original poster highlights that if the Tarnished are seen as members of HorahLou's tribe or even his bastard children from his time in exile, Morgott's hatred for the player becomes deeply personal. It turns the struggle for Lendel into a bitter fight between brothers, the cursed, forgotten son who stayed to protect a throne that never wanted him, versus the favored bastard, who got to wander the Badlands at their father's side. This reframes the player's journey from a random Tarnished's climb to a classic tale of a disinherited heir rising to reclaim a crown, giving the Lord's apparition fight in the capital significant weight as a chilling foreshadowing of our mentor's true royal identity. The theory offers a brilliant reimagining of the relationship between Serosh and Malekith. The poster suggests that the lion on Godfrey's back is not merely a beast used to suppress his bloodlust, but a spiritual tether for Malekith's soul. They argue that Marika may have split the shadow-bound beast into two entities, a mindless, physical vessel for destined death in Farum Azula, and a spiritual parasite grafted onto Godfrey to keep him under her divine control. This would mean the final confrontation at the foot of the Erdtree is actually an act of liberation. When Godfrey kills the lion in his second phase, he is finally breaking free from Marika's shackles to face the player as a free warrior and a fellow Tarnished, rather than a puppet of the Golden Order. Ultimately, this perspective suggests that Marika's entire plan was a desperate, multi-layered scheme to end her own eternal servitude. She likely expected Godfrey to lead a massive army of Tarnished to victory, never predicting that a single individual would become a glitch in the Matrix and surpass even her first lord. By framing the player as the student who finally bests the master, the theory makes the final ascension to the throne feel earned and narratively complete. Even Melina's potential identity as the glow-eyed queen fits into this puzzle, suggesting she was Marika's final insurance policy to ensure the Erdtree burned if the Tarnished army failed. Within this framework, the final encounter itself would shift from a generic boss battle into a heart-wrenching passing of the torch. Rather than a sudden confrontation with a stranger, The dialogue would reflect the long journey you shared together at the Roundtable hold. As the fight begins, the revelation of his identity would be handled with a heavy sense of duty rather than malice. Upon seeing the player at the foot of the Erd Tree, he would look upon the burning thorns with a mixture of pride and sorrow, acknowledging that while he has finally remembered his name as Godfrey, the man who once mentored you in the hold, the warrior HorahLou, is the one who truly respects your strength. He would emphasize that he isn't fighting for the Golden Order, but to test if his star pupil is truly ready to shoulder the burden of a new age. The transition to the second phase would then become the most significant narrative departure. While in the final game he kills Serosh to unleash his bloodlust. In this version, the act is one of desperate self-liberation. As he tears the lion from his back, he is physically ripping away the last vestige of Marika's influence. He would shed the golden armor of the Elden Lord and return to the blood-stained garb of a warrior, declaring that he will face his kin not as a king, but as the man who taught them how to survive. His final moments would then provide the emotional closure the current game lacks. As he falls, he would offer a personal benediction, acknowledging the irony that he was brought back to slay you, only to find you are the only one capable of finishing what he started. His dying breath would be used to name you his true successor, leaving you before the final fog gate not just as a conqueror, but as the rightful heir to a legacy passed down through blood and battle. Contrast to that, however, in the canon event of the game, I see his decision to kill Serosh as a final, desperate act to win. As Marika's orders are no longer to die, but to brandish the ring, it is my opinion that he reverted to his original name, HorahLou, the moment he was banished, but kept his lordly persona alive solely in the hope that Marika would call him back. When he finally abandons his axe and fights with his bare hands, I see the man who defeated the Lord of Beasts all those years ago. I believe that his second phase embodies the very essence of the Badlands culture, a force of nature mirroring the Red Bears in its raw destruction. I hear the marching drums and commanding horns of his soundtrack as the music of a warlord resigned to his fate. To me, Godfrey is the final test, a story both grand and personal that forces us to learn from his strength and his mistakes. Because in the end, I believe he remains human, acting according to his principles until the very last second. His final words of respect to the warrior who slew his son proved to me that his honor was the one thing he could never cast aside.
I've given thee courtesy enough. Now I fight as HorahLou.